Mike.
I'm Brad.
And this is Ministry Chemistry.
Here we go.
Welcome back to another episode of Ministry Chemistry, where today, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are talking to the one, the only, Tina Fox.
Woo! Tina Fox.
Hey.
It almost sounds like, you get the Tina and the F in there, and it's like, no, it's not Tina Fey. It's Tina Fox.
Tina Fox.
Tina Fey. Yeah.
Tina Fox is just about as funny as Tina Fey. Just about.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. No.
Yeah. I'm rewatching 30 Rock right now, which is an incredible life decision, like an incredibly good life decision. I would highly recommend that.
I've never actually seen it. I need to.
Oh, yeah. It's so good. It's so good. Before we were talking about, it's the pandemic and people are eating a lot. And so I thought today we should kick this off with our favorite desserts. Just to share, just to have some common conversation with our listeners about what are some of your favorite desserts, people. Mike has a whole list, I know.
You know what? I'm just gonna go broad here, and I'm gonna go out on a limb. Cobbler. I'm just going cobbler, fill in the blank. Apple, cherry, blackberry, blueberry, mixed berry, strawberry, cobbler.
Rhubarb.
So basically, crushed up pie. You like crushed up pie.
Whoa.
Uh-oh.
This is
now there's a fight. Now there's going to be a
discrimination. Yeah, it is not crushed up pie.
But isn't it?
It's basically top crust pie.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Do you pour milk on your cobbler?
What is wrong with you?
Right? Brad knows what I'm talking about.
I'm a milk pourer, yes.
Yep.
You're talking about pouring cold milk over the top of hot cobbler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's called communism.
It's not. I would liken that to what I do to watermelon, which is I salt my watermelon.
I salt my watermelon. We're from the South. It's like watermelon and cantaloupe. Melon gets salted. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. Don't yell at me. Tina, what's your favorite dessert?
Crushed up pie.
I love all things sugary, though, I will say, but probably ice cream. Do I have to pick a flavor?
That's right. No, because
I didn't
Mike
pick
didn't
a
pick
cobbler. So
yeah, blank ice cream, just like blank cobbler.
Like it.
There you go.
Bradford.
Oh my goodness. For those that don't know, I am a passionate lover of donuts. All kinds of donuts.
You gotta speak more quickly, man.
No, I am a passionate
lover of donuts. You do like a good donut, man.
I do. We over the last probably 2.5 weeks, we've made donuts 3 or 4 times.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Are you trying to give your children the beaties?
I hope so.
I'm thinking we should challenge our listeners to find either a cobbler flavor or an ice cream flavor that would not fill in mine or Tina's blank. Like, I don't know of a cobbler flavor, but I've traveled in Asia and matcha ice cream is like a huge thing over there. Yeah. I don't know if that would fit your fill in the blank. Maybe.
I'd probably eat it. I'd eat it.
Tina spent some time in Thailand, and so did they have odd ice cream flavors there?
They had different fruits than we have here. So there was a lot of lychee and things called jackfruit and stuff, things I had never had before. So a lot of ice cream or things like that were flavored with different fruits. I called them weird fruits when I was there, but different.
That's good.
Renee, you didn't say yours.
Yeah, so I am not much of a desserts person. I'm not a sweets person. If the options are more spaghetti or more steak, I will choose that over, saving room for dessert. When people are like,
More for
save room
me.
for dessert, I'm like, no, thanks. I'm good. So,
Yeah, and
but
for
I
me,
do
it's-
like some desserts. I love tiramisu. I love key lime pie and banana pudding. And I'm an ice cream eater. Like, I like ice cream, a good apple pie, a good brownie.
Matcha ice cream?
I've never had matcha ice cream.
you should try it. You should try it. It's different. It's different. Tina, have you had it since you've been in Thailand? Have you had matcha ice cream?
I haven't been. It was a long time ago. It was like the summer of '96 that I spent in Thailand. So like,
did you miss the Atlanta games when you were in Thailand?
We watched them, and you know what I realized is like how much of a bigger world we have than you notice when you're watching the games in the States. I saw countries and sports I'd never seen before that were on in Thailand because that was just that part of the world. So it was kind of cool, broadened my horizons. But no,
I've heard that.
Matcha's like, I'm sure they had it, but it's like really been trendy like the past few years. Matcha everywhere. So
yeah.
That's
trendy
funny.
matcha. Yeah.
So the reason we've invited Tina on into our conversation today is because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and Tina is a licensed professional counselor and ordained pastor, and has a lot of wisdom to share around this topic. And rather than me introduce her to you, I think it best that you hear her voice to share a little bit about who she is and who and what gets most of her time and energy in life. So Tina, can you share just like a snapshot of who you are?
Well, I was born in 1974, and no, should I go year by year? No.
Yes, please.
These questions are so hard because you don't know where to start. But the most important thing to me is my husband, Joe, and my daughter, Lydia, who is about to turn 3 this month.
Oh, my goodness.
One of my hobbies is sleeping, but that hasn't happened in a while. And
is that a real hobby?
It is. Oh, I could sleep like a champion, like if it were an Olympic sport. Except now that we have, ever since she's come along, sleep is just non-existent. So
I'm in training.
You're in sleep training. I'm trying to think if there's what's interesting about me, Renee. Help me out. I'm a pastor in the Methodist Church. My husband and I are currently pastoring together. I went back and got my counseling degree several years ago while I was a pastor, primarily because it seemed like to me that there's such a connection between our spiritual lives and our emotional lives. And a lot of times people would come to me and they tended to get stuck spiritually where they were stuck emotionally. I don't know if that makes sense. So it's like unresolved stuff was keeping people from moving forward in their relationship with Jesus as well as in their relationship with other people. And I just think there's a big connection between those things. And I wanted more skills to be able to help people become healthy and whole, and myself too. I'm still in the process of becoming healthy and whole. But should I say anything else about myself? I have dogs. Renee hates dogs. I love them.
I don't hate dogs. I don't.
Yes,
I don't.
You come to my house and you're like, "Hi, dog. Don't come near me."
They are dogs, and I said hello.
You're like, you're close to me.
I've established my boundaries healthily with your
right.
animals.
You are allowed to have boundaries.
I told them what I was comfortable with. Come on, counselor.
My dogs have no boundaries. So. They don't respect boundaries.
I think
they don't like dogs because they don't respect boundaries.
Well, yeah. See, yeah. I think in the church, in the Christian church, and I don't even think it's the Western Christian church. So I'd be curious your thoughts on that. There is a stigma around mental health and receiving mental health support and access to even addressing the concerns that mental health struggles bring about. You know, Jesus often says, do not worry, don't be anxious, right? And yet people have anxiety. They have chemical imbalances inside of them that create, or they have emotional struggles with certain settings and environments that, to your earlier comment, they can't overcome. It gets them stuck. And how would you, so I'm curious how you would characterize the predominant viewpoint of mental health in the Christian faith world.
Well, I do agree there's still a stigma. I think it's gotten better. I would like to say that. I think, Rick Warren, who's the pastor of Saddleback out in California, I think that's the biggest church still in the country. His son died by suicide several years ago after struggling with mental illness for years. And Kay Warren, his wife, has really kind of made it a point of advocacy in the church to help address mental illness. And they've had seminars and conferences, and I think she's done an amazing job helping the church. And other pastors and bloggers are starting to come out with their struggles and their sharing. A lot of people still think of it, though, as a lack of faith, that if you just had more faith, if you just read your Bible more. But anybody who struggles with clinical depression or clinical anxiety knows that you just can't will yourself out of that. I think people who have experienced it or have someone who has experienced it tend to be a little more compassionate about it. We're so fearfully and wonderfully made, but there is a biological component, a mental component, a spiritual component, an emotional component. It's all mixed in there together. I wish the stigma were less, however. They say, actually, even with suicide, that the more we talk about it, the more open we are about it, the less it actually happens. And people seem to have this mindset that these are topics we shouldn't touch on. It's going to put ideas into people's minds, that kind of stuff. But I think the more open we can be with our struggles. I was at our churches, we have this annual conference every year with all the pastors, and they were giving a report on our health insurance. And they talked about the top 2 prescription medications that pastors, at least in our area of the world, were taking. And the number 1 was for heart conditions, and the other was for antidepressants. So I think it's common, even in clergy. It's just a common thing that we are scared to talk about because there's been this myth that it's a weakness, a moral failing to struggle with mental health issues. But the more we talk about it and more people share their experiences, I think that's changing. I hope that's changing.
Do you find, because I think when someone says they're a pastor, I've heard that sometimes shuts down conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Do you find that more conversations are shut down when people learn you're a pastor or when people learn you're a counselor?
Oh, pastor, definitely. Counselor, they're like, it's like when you meet somebody who's a doctor and you're like, oh, I have this sore on my knee. Can you check it out? Counselors are like, oh, let me tell you about my mother. That kind of stuff. So, yeah. No, people seem to, they wouldn't want to tell anybody they talk to a counselor, but they actually don't mind talking to you. It's kind of interesting. Pastor, they're like, what did I just say? I'm sorry for what I said. Did I cuss? I'm sorry I cussed. It's crazy. It's the best on an airplane. I like to sit by people and talk to them and not let them know what I do and like have this long conversation. And then they eventually find out, they're like, oh my goodness. Yeah, it's so fun.
Tina, I have a question. This
Sure.
kind of ties that whole like counselor and pastor together. Brad and I just had a conversation recently, and I've heard these conversations before. People kind of like reading mental health back into biblical stories, and kind of dividing a line between like mental health and over spiritualizing. And it seems like in the modern time we have people who don't want to do that, so they over spiritualize things that are mental health related.
Right.
And other people who take a scientific approach and they read mental health into everything biblical that may be on that spiritual realm. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, as a counselor and pastor, like how do you balance those two things? And you know what I mean? Keep them in. Yeah. I feel like there's a tension that still exists even today with those things.
Certainly. I mean, I had a professor in my counseling program who always talked about looking at multiple causal factors for whatever somebody is going through. So you have to look what's going on biologically, what's going on spiritually, what all these things play into it. There's no just one simple answer for why mental health struggles happen. It's very complex, but you also in the DSM, or in the DSM-5 now, that's the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual. That's how you diagnose someone with a mental health illness. And they have to meet certain criteria. In popular culture, people go around using words like even like depressed or bipolar, when someone would not, just because if someone has mood swings or tends to be moody, people will say, that person is bipolar. That's not an accurate description of what bipolar is.
Most people say that about their spouse more than anything.
Yeah. can be sad. It's a very human experience to be sad and deeply sad, to grieve, to hurt over losses without being in a clinical depression. So I think we have to be careful both ways to not over spiritual. Like I would look at scripture and I would say, my guess that I don't know all the clinical factors would be that, like, King David, I would guess he struggled with some form of bipolar disorder, just based on the things he says, but I couldn't accurately diagnose him with that without meeting him, talking to him, and that could be just my stuff reading into it. And Elijah certainly struggled with depression. He wanted to die, didn't want to eat, didn't want to sleep. I mean, he had some actual major characteristics of that. But again, people are complex. The people from scripture that we can't sit down with and have a conversation, they had all kinds of things happening in their life. You have to look at people's social connections, what's happening in their life. There are all kinds of stuff to figure out what's actually going on. So I just think people are more complex than a black and white answer. Even
I find it so interesting that you went more Old Testament characters, because you know what I was looking at and like what I've heard the conversation that I've heard around this issue has revolved more around like healings in the New Testament, you know, like Jesus casting out demons and stuff, and people are like, well, was that really demons, or was it like someone with a mental health disorder, and Jesus just healed them from that, you know? And who knows? I mean, we would never know until we're maybe one day we'll get to ask Jesus face to face, like, hey, was that like bipolar disorder, or was that a demon, you know?
My husband is more of a historian than I am. That was his major in college, and I mean, he's a pastor too, but he's just brilliant. And he always says, and I never thought about this until I met him, but he said the ancient people knew what these diseases were, what seizures were. Like Julius Caesar had epilepsy. People, they know the difference between demonic possession and some physical a seizure or some kind of manifestation. That we tend to, on this side of history, on our side of history, we look back and think, well, they didn't have the same intelligence that we have, or the same understanding that we have. They did. They might have voiced it differently. So when Jesus said he cast out a demon in someone, he knew what a demon was and what, say, epilepsy was, or what some other kind of seizure was. I think that we discredit the people who came before us by thinking that didn't know.
That's a great clarification. Someone I love to read a lot always calls that post-Enlightenment arrogance.
Yep.
Like, you know, on this side of the Enlightenment period, we think we're so much smarter than people of ancient history.
And yet no one can figure out how they built the pyramids. I mean, tell me that, like, seriously, are we that much smarter? I don't know.
Yeah.
Going along that train of thought, you know, in 2020, we have what seems like so many more resources or understanding of some of these complex emotionally tumultuous instances that happen to a person. And so we're not smarter, but we do have more understanding. And it makes you wonder, you know, shouldn't that lift the stigma as well? We have so much more understanding. What your mom struggled with in the 50s, you're struggling with now, and it's okay to say, well, this must have been what mom had, but there weren't the resources to help her.
You know, one area that seems really different to me is in the area of sexual abuse. Like that is much more mainstream to talk about. Like even when I was growing up, you wouldn't talk about that. There was no Oprah on TV having people who had abuse history talking about it. It was brushed under the rug. It was brushed under the rug in the church. Sometimes it still is, sadly. But I just think people are more open about, or even my grandmother, she had 2 stillbirths. She had 7 kids, but then in between had 2 stillbirths, and they just didn't talk about it. I was a hospital chaplain, and they have you hold the baby, and they take fingerprints, and they have little blankets, and you have a whole service that never happened back then. And those aren't necessarily mental health, but they can contribute to mental health issues. We talk about and process feelings, I think, more in some ways as a culture than we used to. Well, but people don't like negative stuff. That's the problem. I mean, we just don't.
But they love watching the news.
We watch other people go through negative stuff. We don't want to go through our negative stuff, you know?
I think they don't like negative stuff. I won't say they. I don't like negative stuff that somehow creates a dissonance in me.
Yeah.
You know, there are certain categories of movies and shows I can't watch, even though I know full well they're fiction. But the storyline resonates in such a way. I've said I need a cleansing of the palate after watching that, because I can't go to, it's not even scary movies, but it's the story hits not even maybe a shared experience I've had, but maybe some deep rooted fear that I don't want to think about or feel about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think, and I don't think it's a stigma. I think people are still scared of their feelings, because if they want to be in control, they can't be in control of those all the time. Mm-hmm. So accessing things or being exposed to things where feelings might come up that they can't have any predictability about, people run. They're like, no, thank you.
Yeah. Who wants to, I mean, some feelings are really hard, and a lot of healing makes you sit with those things. And I mean, I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, so I'm like, bring on the feelings, let's sit with them. But most people are not like that at all. They run from them. And I'm
a 7, so yeah, like, no run away.
Ever.
No feelings ever.
I'm like, and I manufacture feelings just to have feelings, you know. I mean, but I'm weird. I mean, 4s are weird. Most people are not like that.
No, there's a beauty in 4s. I'm going to Enneagram for like 30 seconds because I was
Wait, let me get a timer.
Yep. I was in a small group this winter, and we took a week and we talked about each number, each type, you know, but the good that they bring to the world. And there's a lot of value in someone who is not uncomfortable with feelings, who can help someone else maybe learn how to be more comfortable in their feelings, and who can pretty well articulate and express, this is a feeling I'm feeling, and this is what that means right now. Mm-hmm. And so of the 9 types on the Enneagram, 4s are so good at that if they're in a healthy space.
Yeah. They can also be moody and brooding, but
yeah, they're awful in that area.
But I think there's a gift in, I consider the part of being a 4 that's a gift is being able to sit with people. Like it's not uncomfortable for me to sit with people in deep pain or to hear. That's just, to me, that's part of the human experience. It doesn't make me uncomfortable. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And I think that has to do with that personality type more than anything. But.
Brad, I think we need to find a 4 friend in our life, man.
Yeah.
Tina will be your friend.
I'll be your friend. You can always find a 4. We're awesome.
That might be very helpful for me and you both, Brad.
You have no feelings. I have too many feelings. Yes.
Brad's a 9 on the Enneagram and likes to just you know, stuff it all down. It's not real. It doesn't exist. It's not there.
And then it comes, you know, I have done this myself too, but I always tell people in counseling, like, if you give your feelings space to surface, you actually end up having more control over them than if you don't, because they're made to come out. They're meant to come out. They are going to come out. And if you push them down, they're going to come out at a time you don't want them to come out. If they know, it's almost like they're like, to personify them a little bit. If they know you're going to give them space to be heard, they'll let you have a little bit more control over them. If they think you're going to stuff them, they're like, hey, I'm going to show up right in the middle of this big birthday party and make you cry, or, you know. That's my take on feelings. But.
Oh, there's a lot of truth to that, because I've walked with people, and I'm sure we each have in our ministries, that they're having some sort of physiological reaction or an outburst that they didn't know was inside of them. And it's like,
right,
you got feelings that need to get out, man.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
God bless you both for being like that, because you know me, Renee, I'm like, how can I listen to this attentively and put a positive spin on it once they're done talking?
Yeah, you gotta be, but you need that too. You need the optimist, and you need the fun, and you need spontaneity, and you need the adventure of a 7, you know. I feel like you, Renee. I'm numbering everybody.
See, but Mike likes to avoid it. It's not so much, let's reframe this. He's like, let's just forget it exists, please, and move on.
Are we done? Can we go play now?
So I'm going to totally hijack this joyful conversation. Mike had a great question where it comes to this pandemic that we're living in, the isolation, the quarantine. and people's mental health, especially in, and I'm going to let him ask it, but especially in some really unfortunate situations.
Yeah.
Tina, it feels like there's a lot of poles, but it feels like there's a north and south pole here. One, and I think a lot of this is just information overload. People are just processing the information, and there's too much to process to make a informed decision. But there's the camp that is very, very concerned about like just the physical health of catching this virus and what it could do in spreading. And then there's the camp that's very concerned about the economic impact of shutting down the country and all that. And I think both of those are warranted, but I think lost in that, there's kind of the effect, the psychological effects of just being quarantined for one. And that's different for everyone. I mean, we got 2 toddlers in the house and a teacher who's trying to teach other young people. So it's a lot, but there's other people who are completely alone in this. And then in the midst of that, worried about which one of these poles should I be the most concerned with, So I don't know. I don't know if there's really a question in there. I'm just tapping into your expertise and seeing if you could speak into that a little bit.
Well, I think that's a really accurate perception, but I would say no matter what pole you're on, the underlying emotion there, my underlying emotion is really fear of the unknown, fear of what's going to happen. The fear may be different for different people, but I think collectively we are all experiencing some kind of fear that's different than what we've ever faced before, at least not just as a nation, but as a world. Like there's no one who's untouched by this. And I think it's creating a very anxiety-ridden, fearful kind of environment. I mean, you can't even, I was at the grocery store the other day and somebody was like closer than 6 feet from me and I like backed up from them. And that's not my personality at all. And I didn't like it. I'm like, I mean, I know you're just a social distance, but I felt like a jerk because and my thought was, why are you so close to me? What's wrong with you? And this is crazy. What is happening in our world? And yeah, I think it's fear.
Yeah.
I wonder a lot about that. I wonder a lot about, and I don't think I've said it in this space, the ripple effects, the psychological ripple effects that are going to shift how we and those younger than us do life for their entire lives.
Right.
Like when my grandma
are we scared of people?
Yeah. When my grandma passed away, right? And my family was cleaning out the house, and as you do, there were still pockets of cash hidden in places because she grew up in that. She was born in 1930 in that Depression era, and the way her family, she still jarred and canned food. Like she had 6 kids living at home just in case. Right. Yeah. But till her dying day, there were things that she did in preparation for what if again. And I think this is definitely one of those moments that we are going to start living and interacting or not interacting in ways that this is just how we do because of the pandemic of 2020.
Right. Yeah, it's going to shape us. And I don't know what that shape will end up being, but we are being shaped in a certain direction.
People are afraid to make eye contact as if that can pass along the virus.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So Tina, just from your perspective, and I know this would be more of a one-on-one sit down for someone, but just generally speaking to anyone listening, I tend to shine rays of sunshine into every situation. So when I hear oh, we're going to be quarantined, I start thinking oh, I get to spend all this time with my kids, and which is total garbage on most days. I do try and look at it that way. But how would you generally advise someone, just anyone, no one in particular, to deal with some of this, the fear and not knowing what comes next, and really not knowing how long this is all going to last?
I don't want to sound like cliche. A lot of times counselors and stuff, they say these things, and it's because they're true, so they end up being these cliches. But to be gentle with yourself, to be compassionate with yourself. I've heard a lot of people I thought I was going to get all this stuff done in quarantine, and I've gotten nothing done. And it's because we're collectively experiencing a trauma, essentially. I mean, this is trauma, and I remember who said this, but all trauma is cumulative, meaning every trauma that happens in our life it builds on itself. And so that's why you have situations where, like, the straw that broke the camel's back, and you have this horrible, painful, awful breakdown over something. You've made it through all these incredibly difficult things in life, and you didn't have this reaction, and something that in comparison seems so much smaller causes this just epic breakdown in your life. It's because the stuff is building. And so I think for all of us, this is also tapping into all of our past stuff, all our unhealed stuff, all our other fears, all our other, just the fragility of being human. And I think it's okay to be scared, to question, to not know what's going to, let yourself do that, and not have expectations of what this time should be. Like, if you don't learn a whole new language while you're in quarantine, because all you can do is eat and veg out in front of the TV. I mean, maybe just be kind to yourself and gentle with yourself. No one knows the correct, I don't know that there is a right response. No one has been through this before. We don't know what we don't know what the future holds, and we don't know what the proper response is. I think we just need to acknowledge that this is a really hard time, and it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to be upset. And I know we don't like those feelings, but it's okay to feel them.
Oh, that's really good. I feel like probably the average person has experienced a lifetime of trauma in the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been heavy. It's been really, really heavy. So I appreciate your input very much.
Well, you can even, when 9/11 happened, there were reports of people being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder just from watching the images on TV over and over and over again. And I see something similar happening. I mean, we've all seen Italy and body bags and depressing topic, but like New York City, like they have set up morgues. And I mean, there are some really frightening images that I think are also adding to this. So, I mean, I'd also say turn off the news as much as possible. I mean, stay informed as much as you can, but those being bombarded constantly by images of our mortality and our frailty, that does not help anxiety. And I don't think it's necessary.
And things out of our control.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not a big advocate for, having to be in control, I don't think. But controlling what I can control is important, because my personal spirals happen when I realize there is no way to fix or change this, whatever this is. But I'll work to try to figure out how I can, but some things I can't. And so what can I do?
Which, Renee, that to me is the key to mental health it's that like serenity prayer thing. It's God grant me the serenity to know what I have the power to change and what I don't, and to not confuse those two things, because we end up running in circles trying to fix things that we absolutely can't fix. And then we avoid fixing the things that we do have power and control over. And that leads to dysfunction in life. And if we could get those two things in line, fix the things I can't fix, or control the things I can and should be controlling, and leave the things that I do not have power over alone, I think that leads to better mental health.
So what would you say to someone who recognizes I'm not okay, but is resistant to seeking out extra support? How do you speak into those folks?
Do you mean extra support of any kind, or just of counseling kind? Or
yeah, counseling kind. Like, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. We're trying to shine a spotlight on it so that folks know, hey, this exists, and you might fall into a category of needing some extra support, some extra counseling. Don't be afraid to access it. And they're like, I'm not afraid. I just don't really need it. Like, how do you talk to folks that maybe a loved one says you do, but they're not listening?
If people have to come to the realization for themselves, I think that they need help, that loved ones can't help urge it along and that kind of stuff. But I think just try to be open to, especially like if you're a Christian, or praying to God, what's going to help me become more like you? Is this something you want me to do? Help me to not be scared of it. and I think God will open up those doors too. But I think we can also push people. Like I had one client one time, a teenager who had been to multiple counselors, and mom had decided that she was going to go to counseling and they were just going to find one, and find one that stuck. And it was miserable. And I mean, the counseling session was miserable, and I can usually get teenagers to talk to me, but I've never encountered somebody who did not want to be there more than this girl. And I finally said, "You don't want to be here." She's like, "No, I don't. I think this is stupid." And I tried to talk to her about some of the benefits of it or whatever. I said, "Okay, I can't change your mind on this. This is why I think this would be helpful. But if you're not willing to participate in it, this is really a waste of your time and your mom's money." And mom didn't, I talked to mom after that. She didn't like that answer, but you can't, I think that's what I can control, and you can't control that. You cannot force the teenager, especially, to talk to somebody they don't want to talk to if they're dead set against it. And same with people. I think we can suggest and offer stories of why maybe this was helpful to me or why I know it was helpful to someone else. But I think also letting people say no to even what might be in their best interest. Like they have the right to not pursue that if they don't want to. And some people would rather be miserable than do the hard work. It's easier. It's familiar.
It's funny hearing you talk about that. I don't have as much experience with mental health, but there's a lot of history of addiction and alcoholism in my family. And hearing you talk about that, it sounds very similar. Like an alcoholic or an addict is never going to recover until they want to. So,
and we can have some. I mean, like with addiction, you have interventions, and you tell the person how their behavior is affecting you. And usually, when you do that in mass, it does have an effect on people. But still, there are people who are like, I am not. They're in so much denial; they're just not willing to do it. Other times, it helps. It doesn't hurt to share your experiences with people and what you would hope for them and what you'd want for them. But the bottom line is you can't force it. I wish I could just make everybody do what I want them to do and what I think is best for them. But
share
really
that
hard.
power with us.
The world would be full of rays of sunshine if I could do that.
Mini sevens walking all around.
So just as a kind of close it out, who are some of the voices that you read or listen to frequently that really give you some life and good perspective?
Well, I love Brené Brown. She's a sociologist, and I've read all her books, and she has a podcast now that's really awesome. She talks a lot about vulnerability and not giving into shame and our need for connection. And I think of anybody I've ever read or studied, she hits it about as close to anybody about what do we need in human relationships with one another. So I love her. My favorite Christian theologian is Dallas Willard. I just think he's the most amazing person who ever lived, besides Jesus and Renee. You know what though? Something I think helps mental health too is I love to read and think and learn. I've really had a fun time. There's this Libby app. Have you seen that? It's for library books and stuff. You can get any books online.
I'm on it right now, looking up Brené Brown books. Rising Strong, her best book. I love it so much. But on that Libby app, I've been reading just fun fiction that other people have said is good, and it's been kind of fun to, especially this world, escape a little bit the reality of all the stress that we're under, and just reading some good old stories is kind of fun too.
Well, and that was going to be my last question, was just what are some good just things to do to help our mental health state during this time?
Here's the problem. This comes from Brené Brown too. I'm going to say we all can go towards what she calls numbing behaviors. And so we tend to, in times of crisis and stress, we all have our favorite ones, but things that we go to that maybe aren't bad in and of themselves, but they're bad in excess. And the more we do them to kind of detach, the more numb we become. And the problem with that is, this is a direct quote from Brené Brown, you can't selectively numb emotion. So if you numb the bad emotions, you also numb the good emotions. Not that emotions are bad or good, I don't mean the painful ones as well as the beautiful ones. So I think in times like this, we can binge watch Netflix. Nothing wrong with that. But if we do that day after day after day, it can become a numbing behavior, and I think start to be detrimental. Not that there's anything wrong with taking time to do that at times. So I think paying attention to, is what I'm doing helping me just to calm down and relax, things I like to do, or am I trying to escape too much to the point where I'm detaching from life and myself and my relationships, that I'm becoming numb with these numbing behaviors. Even online shopping, which is, I know I've been doing that since I go like, ooh, let's look online because we're all here and we can't go to the store. Like, nothing wrong with buying stuff online, unless you start going into debt and buying a bunch of junk you don't need. Just balance, I guess. Finding things that give you life, or even that help you numb for a little bit, but not so much that you detach. Staying connected somehow, staying connected to people and to God and to yourself.
You were the first person I ever met who used to, and I know that you relish this and want to do it again, would go on a week-long silent retreat.
Oh, I miss it.
I know you did.
I don't understand why people, well, I don't really I'm still working and I have a toddler. So like there's no time for boredom or downtime. So, but when I hear people say, I don't know what to do, or this is so lonely, or I'm like, I would love it if I were like in a house by myself, quarantined, and all I could do is think and read and feel my feelings. That would be my dream.
And I'm like, that just sounds.
Aren't we all so uniquely made?
And that's the point, right? Everyone's got their own way of not just approaching these days, but all days. And it's okay to recognize that. And then it's good for all of us to find value in that and who we are, but then who others are as well. And so your week-long retreat sounded terrible to me. Like, you only talk to people when the sun goes down, and it's only like one person. And I'm like, oh God, I'm not even a super extrovert. And
you know what though? What it made me realize, because you'd talk to like a spiritual director for like 45 minutes a day, and they would kind of say like, where are you experiencing God? Where are you hearing from God? Where are you struggling to hear from God? And they give you like scriptures to read, things to pray, prayer exercises. And I didn't realize how distracted my mind was, how busy and loud my life really was. And it took and they said it took a good 3 days just to be able to stop your mind from constantly spinning. But some of the sweetest prayer time I've ever experienced in my life happened on those retreats. And I think I was just in a place to actually hear God. So I wasn't alone. I know it wasn't people, and it wasn't an audible voice, that very clearly heard from God in ways that I didn't even know I needed to hear from God. And I wouldn't have had I not given that space to that. I talk too much. We all, even on retreat, like church retreats, like there's not enough space to actually hear from God. We're so busy like having like Bible studies and sermons and reflection time and discussion questions with your table groups or whatever. Those are great things, but we also need space to hear from God, to listen to God, to even know what to say to God. That's my take.
And I think that's a perfect take to end on. Listeners, this week, we want to encourage you to think about, where is the space that you're giving yourself, both to maybe hear and listen to God, or just to take some time and really consider how you're doing and how others are doing around you. And then I know we're a podcast, and some of you might know us and some of you might not, but if you need to reach out and talk with any of us, we are here. We'd love to chat with you and encourage and connect you with some other supports that might be beneficial for your health and wellness and spiritual journey as we all walk that together. For this week on Ministry Chemistry, I'm Renee.
So Mike.
I'm Tina.
And Brad.
We'll talk to you next time.